Our Old Testament lesson comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 18, verses 1 through 15, and then chapter 21, verses 1 through 7. The Lord appeared to Abram by the oaks of Mamre, as he sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up and saw 3 men standing near him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed down to the ground. He said, "My Lord, if I find favor with you, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. Let me bring a little bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant." So they said, "Do as you have said." And Abraham hastened into the tent to Sarah and said, "Make ready quickly 3 measures of choice flour, knead it, and make cakes." Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to the servant who hastened to prepare it. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. They said to him, "Where is your wife, Sarah?" And he said, "There, in the tent." Then one said, "I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife, Sarah, shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent entrance behind him. Now Sarah and Abraham were old, advanced in age. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I've grown old, and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?' Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? At the set time I will return to you in due season, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. He said, "Oh, yes, you did laugh." Chapter 21. The Lord dealt with Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to his son, whom Sarah bore him. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Now Sarah said to herself, "God has brought laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh with me." And she said, "Who would have ever said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Father's Day is not only a time to reflect on the wisdom of fathers, as Helen so ably led us to do during the children's time, but also to remember, apparently, fathers for their habit of telling really bad jokes. Over the past few days and in the past years, there have been a variety of programs that on Father's Day highlight what are called dad jokes. And you can go on and hear a variety of panelists and experts talk about dad jokes, bad dad jokes from their own experience and memory, or think about what makes a good dad joke or a bad dad joke. I was listening to one program that said there are some characteristics about dad jokes that they always have to have. Dad jokes have to be really corny, and they have to be groan-inducing, and they have to be a little bit of a puzzle for a kid to figure out. And it's also true that most of the time when you hear a dad joke, you hear it while you're riding in the car, and dad is driving, and there's no way for you to escape. So here are some examples of dad jokes that we can think about as we honor fathers today on Father's Day. One dad says to his kids as they're driving, "Hey, is that a flock of cows over there?" "No, it's not a flock, it's a herd." "A herd of what?" "Herd of cows." "Yeah, I've heard of cows. There's a flock of them right over there." Or here's one. "Why can't you tell jokes to a kleptomaniac?" "Because they are always taking things literally." It takes a minute. Maybe when you were children, you figured them out faster. I'm not sure. But did you hear about the two peanuts that were walking down the street? One of them was assaulted. Just let me know if you want me to stop, because I won't. What's the difference? Here's one. This is a tricky one. What's the difference between a sewing machine and a kiss? One seems so nice, while the other sews seems nice. It's almost a bit of a limerick. I was trying to remember any jokes that my dad told me, and there was one that came back to me that we would hear often again and again as we were asking, "What's for dinner? What's for dinner?" And our dad would say to us, "Well, if we had some eggs, we could have some eggs and ham. If we had some ham." What in the world does that mean? But you hear it over and over again. Now, I don't remember telling any corny jokes to my own kids. My jokes were much more subtle, refined, and mature. One of my favorites was this one. Two hydrogen atoms meet, and one says, "I've lost my electron." And the other says, "Are you sure?" And the first replies, "Yes, I'm positive." How about that? Yeah, I appreciate the groan. That groan affirms it's a good joke. I wonder if Abraham ever told his son Isaac any dad jokes when Isaac was young. I bet Abraham said to Isaac one time, "Hey, Isaac, do you know where Noah was when the lights went out?" "No, Dad, where?" "He was in the dark." And then Isaac would say to his mother, Sarah, "Can you please make him stop?" And I bet Sarah would roll her eyes at Abraham and chuckle to herself. Not really chuckle at Abraham's joke, but just chuckle at the wonder and joy of Isaac's presence. How could you not laugh at the incredible improbability of this child? How could you not laugh at Isaac, whose very name in Hebrew means either he laughs or laughter? But then again, maybe having your first child when your dad is 100 years old and your mom is 90 years old, maybe that's really not any laughing matter. It's been a few years since our children were babies, and you tend to forget what hard work it is to be the parent of an infant or a small child. And this past week at Montreat, we were around a number of youth leaders, including James's mom and dad, who were there at the conference with their infants and small children, pushing strollers up and down those hills and getting high chairs out in the cafeteria and packing and unpacking special food in little plastic containers and chasing toddlers through the lobby and walking about bleary-eyed as everyone's sleep patterns were entirely off schedule. I was exhausted just watching them trying to juggle their babies and their toddlers while at the same time supervising a group of 5, 10, 15, or 20 teenagers. So picture old Father Abraham, 100 years old, trying to fold and unfold a baby jogger while also carrying a huge diaper bag stuffed with toys and bottles and all kinds of other supplies under his arm. Or picture Sarah, 90 years old, pushing her own walker while she's got Isaac in a snuggly on her back. Who in their right mind would ever think it would be a good idea to have a baby when you're 100 years old or 90 years old? That's when you're trying, and I've seen some of you actually do this even though you're not 100 years old, trying to remember the names of your grandchildren or great-grandchildren or even great-great-grandchildren. It's hard to imagine how this senior citizen nursery scene that we read about here in these chapters from Genesis could have been any kind of laughing matter. For one thing, this birth took a long time, a really, really long time. Of course, Sarah's pregnancy is only 9 months, but the announcement and the promise of a son to Abraham and Sarah took over 25 years to fulfill. It was 25 years between the time God first spoke to Abraham and commanded him to leave his own country and go to a land that God would show him, promising to make of Abraham a great nation, to bless him, and to make him a blessing for all the families of the earth. All those years ago, Abraham heard God's call, packed his bags and everything he owned with his wife Sarah and his nephew Lot, and he stepped forward in faith, trusting that God's promise was the direction that his life should take. And I've been wondering how often he laughed as he went along his journey. Was he laughing at himself? Laughing at the idea that he would actually do this, that he would actually respond like this, that he would actually just leave everything and go forward? It seems like such a huge act of faith, doesn't it, to undertake a journey like this into the unknown. But it isn't really just that they're moving to a new country that's remarkable, just kind of changing locations when you're 75 years old. It's the trust required to move to a future that is really impossible in light of the facts that they have lived with their whole lives up to this point. God promises Abraham that Abraham will become a great nation, the father of many peoples. But the fact is that we're told over and over and over again, even before God speaks to Abraham, we're told the reality that Sarah is barren. After years and years of marriage and life together, Abraham and Sarah have no children. This is the condition that defines Abraham and Sarah's future. She's barren, so in some sense there's really no future for them beyond their own lives. And I imagine that's what they stepped forward into each day, even perhaps up until and maybe even after that day when Abraham heard God first call him. God calls Abraham to live trusting that what is possible in life is based on what God can do and what God plans to do, not on what life permits as possible. God calls Abraham as a contradiction of the condition that life says is more determinative than everything else. Go, and I will make of you a great nation, a father of many peoples, and through you all the families of the earth will be blessed. But Sarah is barren. God says, go to the land that I will show you. Go. But Sarah is barren. Now, it seems to me that there are two ways that we can think about this story and all that happens within it as we move along. We can look at it asking the question, does Abraham pack God's promise in a suitcase called barren and carry that with him into the future? Or does Abraham put the label and the condition called barren into a suitcase called God's promise and head that way into tomorrow. Do you see the difference? The difference is about how we live with this kind of God who promises what is practically and reasonably impossible. Do we put God's promise into the conditions and definitions of our lives and try to move forward like that? Or do we put what we think are the conditions and definitions of our lives into the context of God's promise and try to move forward that way? What suitcase are you carrying as you think about where you're going tomorrow? Are you carrying the suitcase of conditions and labels and realities that are weighing you down now, even if within that suitcase there is the kind of glimmer of hope of God's promise? Or are you carrying fully and intentionally and willfully and hopefully the suitcase of God's promise, which you have unburdened yourself and put all that burdens you in life into that bag as you carry it along? I see that as the tension of the next chapters that we move through all the way until we get to the text that we read this morning. This whole arc of Abraham and Sarah's journey, and which is it that they're really moving forward with day by day? And maybe it's both. Maybe it's both. Maybe there are some days when Abraham really doesn't hear as clearly that call and that promise in light of Sarah's barrenness, and he begins to act out things in those terms. You know, those days when they went down into Egypt and he tried to pass his wife Sarah off as his sister and brought calamity on Pharaoh and all of Pharaoh's household. Those days where the promise was just hard to hold on to, and he and Sarah sat down and said, well, you know, there is that slave Hagar. Maybe you should just have a child with her. How was it that Abraham and Sarah moved through day by day on this long story of a child's birth? We focus in the passage that we read on Sarah's laughter. But if you go back and look at it, Abraham was the one who laughed first. There was one time when God came to Abraham and promised him again that he would be a great nation, and took him outside and said, Abraham, look up at the stars there. Your family will be as great as the expanse of all the stars in heaven. That's going to come forth from you. And Abraham looked up there and thought to himself, you know, maybe one baby would be enough right now. How did Abraham and Sarah walk through all those years? How did they move forward together day by day, trusting and believing? Maybe some days they took that promise and put it in the suitcase of everything that was going on in life and just tried to make it through that day. But maybe some days they took everything that was going on in life for them and put them in the suitcase of God's promise so they could get through that day. Which is it? How are we going to make that long journey to the promise of fulfillment? That's the question, I think, that's really posed for us in light of this story. Are we going to allow ourselves to pose the question in our own lives that the strangers posed to Abraham and to Sarah when she laughed her turn? Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? Walter Brueggemann, the Old Testament scholar, says that this is the question that comes up again and again and again and again throughout the whole biblical story. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? And the possibility of discipleship depends upon it. The possibility of discipleship requires that you and I address it to ourselves and seek to answer it in the lives that we live out each and every day. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? As I said earlier, we spent a wonderful week this past week with the youth at the conference in Montreat. They were busy, they were learning, they were being challenged. Each day had a particular theme to it. The theme of the whole conference was missing peace. And each day the theme was a little bit different, trying to explore and expand upon that question. Monday's theme was that God breathes peace into creation. And the whole conference of 1,200 young people were challenged to begin that day breathing, inhaling God's peace, and breathing out, exhaling God's peace into creation. And then on Tuesday, we talked about the reality that God is with us in our broken pieces. And then on Thursday, we talked about the possibility and the promise that God pieces us all back together. And we learned the prayer that we repeated together over and over again throughout the rest of the week. When it all falls apart, Lord, keep us together. When it all falls apart, Lord, keep us together. And on Thursday, the theme was God's call to peace is bold. And at times requires prophetic action, even in the face of the status quo that says some things can't change. But God's call to peace is bold. And then on Friday, as we heard the Easter text, the story of Jesus' resurrection in Matthew's gospel read, we were challenged by the theme that we follow the one who is missing from the tomb. And we are called to be a part of what God is doing in the world. There was some deep thinking going on across this week. Some profound challenges as the youth shared each day in small groups about the anxiety and the stresses and the problems that they feel are going on in their own lives. One of which primarily was, it's great for us to be here this week at Montreat when we're in the midst of all these other young people who profess their Christian faith and celebrate it together. But what happens to us when we go back out through the gates into what they called the real world? How are we supposed to take that with us back out into our lives at home, our lives in our church, our lives in our school, our lives in our community? Do we take God's promise, even the promise of peace, and pack it in the suitcase of everything else that we have to deal with daily? Or do we take everything that we have to deal with daily and put it in the suitcase and promise of God's peace? And the possibility that as we follow that, with our lives in the future, we can change the world. There was one song that we sang toward the end of the week, a song that helped me begin to wrap my mind around everything that the youth were learning, everything that they were absorbing and being challenged to think. And the title of the song was called Love Can Change the World. I had not heard it before, by Aaron Nyquist. And the words of the song go like this: bridges are more beautiful than bombs are. Bridges are more beautiful than bombs. Listening is louder than a lecture. Listening is louder than a shout. But love can change the world. Oh, do we still believe that? Love can change the world. Oh, do we still believe in love? Love. God is love. Our God is love. And love can change the world. An open hand is stronger than a fist is. An open hand is stronger than a fist. Wonder is more valuable than Wall Street. Wonder is more valuable than gold. May we never stop this dreaming of a better world. May we never stop believing in the impossible. Love can change the world. Imagine that. 1,200 youth spending a week being challenged by that idea. That's the nature of our faith, and I hope that we, as the adults who've sent our youth there, haven't forgotten it in our own lives. The power of God's promise to bring new meaning and purpose into the possibilities of our lives that we think just can't change. Our youth have come back now prepared to challenge us with that question. Are you ready to deal with it? Love. Love, do we still believe it? Love can change the world. Paul says that while we were weak, Christ died for us. Can you believe that? While we were weak, Christ died for us. And that produces hope. That produces hope. Because God's love has been poured into our hearts. Put your lives in that today, tomorrow, and forever. Amen.